He called me a teenage grease monkey and abandoned me. 10 years later watched him serve my dinner. Mom died of an aneurysm in October. One day, I had a family. The next day, I had a stack of foreclosure warnings and a house that smelled like cheap lilies. Julian was 10 years older. Growing up, he had been my absolute hero. So, when the bank took the house, I called him. I assumed he'd take me in. He didn't. First, he said he felt awful. Then, he repeated, Diana refuses to marry a guy raising a teenage grease monkey. Next, he told me I was practically an adult anyway. After that, he blamed Diana's strict upbringing, like that erased his cowardly choice. Then he whispered, I'm sorry, in this flat, rehearsed corporate voice. Finally, he hung up and left me listening to the dead dial tone. Looking back, that single sentence did permanent psychological damage. I stopped feeling like a brother and started feeling like a toxic liability. I bounced between miserable situations for years. One shop owner let me sleep on a cot in his unheated garage, and he reminded me daily how incredibly lucky I was to not be freezing. I kept my few shirts in a duffel bag and learned to make myself entirely invisible. I worked graveyard shifts, finished my GED, and acted relentlessly grateful because being obedient was the only way to keep a roof over my head. Meanwhile, Julian and Diana lived like I had died alongside our mother. Luxury ski trips, galas, custom sports cars. Not one single phone call to ask if I was starving. That's when I realized you can utterly abandon someone without ever throwing a punch. By the time I hit 27, I had a thriving custom fabrication shop, my own house, and a brilliant wife, Maya. It wasn't a billionaire's life, but it was fiercely mine. Then, Julian called out of nowhere, crying so violently he kept choking on his own breath. Diana had been bleeding his accounts dry and left him for her tennis instructor. The penthouse was in her trust. The investments were locked by her lawyers. He had nowhere to go. I just need a floor to sleep on, he begged. He kept repeating, please. I couldn't tell if my hands were shaking from fresh rage or from a decade of buried grief. I kept wondering if saying yes would betray the 17-year-old kid shivering in that garage. So, I texted back one brutal line. I cannot help you. When he tried to deploy the blood is thicker than water guilt trip, my jaw clenched. I blocked his number. In hindsight, that was the first time I fiercely protected my own peace without apologizing. A week later, Maya and I went to a high-end steakhouse to celebrate a massive contract. The place was deafening, packed with suits and clinking crystal. A busboy walked up, carrying a heavy tray of dirty plates, and I didn't recognize him until he stared at my face. It was Julian. He froze entirely. His eyes flooded, and then he started violently sobbing right there in the dining room, dropping a plate that shattered like a gunshot. Wealthy patrons stared in disgust. The maitre d' grabbed his collar, hissing threats as he dragged him toward the kitchen. And I hated that my first instinct was still to protect him. I cornered the manager and demanded he just issue a warning, slipping him $100 bill. I didn't do it out of love. I did it because I knew exactly what it felt like to be treated like disposable trash. Julian texted me that night from an unknown number. Thank you. Please, can we just talk? We met at a dim diner. I walked in, aggressively braced for him to ask for a loan. That's when the real bombshell dropped. He told me the sickening truth about his elite marriage. Diana was a psychological monster. When Julian wanted to check on me years ago, she threatened to fabricate domestic abuse charges. She controlled every penny, openly flaunted her affairs, and brushed it off with, you're nothing without my family's money. Deal with it. Then, he revealed the twist that knocked the oxygen right out of my lungs. He had a 6-month-old daughter. Diana abandoned the baby with him, threatening to throw the child into the foster system if Julian ever asked for alimony. I went home and told Maya everything. She didn't hesitate for a microsecond. If he's protecting that little girl, he cannot do it from a shelter, she said. So, I offered Julian our spare bedroom. Strict rules, ironclad boundaries, and absolutely zero contact with Diana. He moved in, worked 2 grueling warehouse jobs, and started hoarding cash like his actual survival depended on it, because it did. He didn't offer me some grand, theatrical apology. He just left quiet sticky notes on my coffee maker that said, thank you. I am so sorry. Like he was learning how to be human again. 4 months later, the divorce mediation happened. Diana saw him holding the baby in the lobby and exploded, screaming that she had maternal rights and wanted full custody just to punish him. Heat climbed my neck and my vision blurred, but Julian stepped forward. You don't get to care now, he snapped, his voice cutting like a serrated blade. You are dead to us. After that, her lawyers tried to harass us until Maya and I threatened a massive extortion countersuit. Diana finally vanished. I expanded my auto shop last month, cutting the ribbon on a massive new facility. The person standing by my side holding the golden scissors wasn't a corporate investor. It was Julian. I still vividly remember the words, teenage grease monkey. I don't think I will ever fully forget the ice in his voice that night, but watching him sacrifice his pride to protect his daughter made me finally forgive him, and it allowed me to choose my own healing, too.